Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of IBDP Simplified. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the subjects offered in Group 2 Language Acquisition. We'll be looking at French app, French B, Spanish app, Spanish B, and Hindi B. We also have a set of guest speakers who will be talking about their experiences with each of the subjects in this that they have chosen in this group. So, without further ado, let's begin.
Okay, guys, so we have Krish Rora with us, and he's a student of French AB. So, welcome, Krish.
Hi, Raghav.
Hi. So, tell us a bit about your DP journey and your experiences.
So far DP has been, it's definitely been stressful, and but I've learned to manage with it over time. Like second semester is much better time management from me than my first semester, but it's still gone well. All my subjects are going well. I'm only finding a few ones hard now, so it's going quite well.
Right. Okay, so you talked about your time management and obviously how in the first semester you faced some difficulties in order to manage time, and then now you say that it's much better. So tell me a few techniques that you used in order to improve your time management.
So in order to improve my time management, mainly what helped me was scheduling. So
Okay.
I would always make like to-do lists and set deadlines for each of my assignments, so that like one night, like a Sunday night, I wouldn't have to prepare 5 reports, but I would only have to finish like the last remaining one, or like all of my
Right.
tasks would be finished in advance. And also just like making use of technology to make sure I'm always on track with my work. So like taking a break of only 5 minutes and setting a timer while between studying, for example.
Right. So given that obviously you have like three HL subjects and three SL subjects, you cannot obviously devote a lot of time to one subject, right? So you have to divide time. So how exactly do you do that? And is your dividing of time depending on the upcoming tasks, or it's just like on a regular basis you might just give 1 hour to a subject or something like that?
Usually it's by the upcoming task. So if I have a business summative in the next week and I have no other summatives,
Right.
or if I have a math summative, then my focus will mainly be on that subject. Even like for example, math is a SL of mine, but if it's in the next week and I have no other summative, I would still focus on math only and no other subject.
Okay.
While also trying to do some part of other subjects. Like for French, I'll still revise my topics and other
Right.
things. And also, since I've taken arts, I've taken music. Obviously, I'll always be working on that, like when playing my
Right.
instrument, because
Right.
that's just part of music.
Right. So now let's come back to French, and we'll talk about the different concepts that you guys have covered in French app.
Okay, so far we've been learning about personal identity, communities, social media, and other important topics like greetings, directions, maps, brochures, these kind of things in French ab initio. Mainly, it's all been things that are more applicable to real life. So, for example,
Right.
directions. If I wanted to ask directions, or if I wanted to introduce myself, say the color of clothing, the locations, things like that. Those are more
Right.
helpful.
Right. And French as a subject in DP, what does it expect from its students, especially from ab initio students, which means that obviously you've not learned the subject, right?
Yeah.
So tell me what are the expectations from a French ab student?
I think definitely people will say that it's easier than it is, like ab initio,
Yeah.
but it's still ab initio is still not that easy, because firstly, when you're learning a completely new language, there's an expectation that all of the topics that you cover, you're always revising them like regularly, or else you'll forget them. So for example, now we are learning another tense. So obviously we have to learn this tense, but we also have to focus and keep revising the past tenses and the verb forms and other phrases that we need to remember, just so we can continue learning. And also, other than that, I would say the vocabulary. There's a lot of important vocabulary that you can't do anything except just memorize.
Yeah.
And that's like the second languages are always like that.
Okay.
So I would say those two are important.
Okay. So obviously, given that, okay. So obviously we have summer breaks, and we all are expected to select us subjects way before our summer break starts. So tell me, what are your goals, and how have you managed your summer break, and how have you devoted your summer break to this subject?
The summer break before IB, honestly, I didn't do that much as many other people do. The main thing I did to prepare for IBDP was mainly just like get an overview of my subject. So I was looking into the curriculums of all. So for example, business management and music, which is a very different subject in IB
Right.
than it is in MYP. So I was just looking into the subject, the curriculums, the uh, mainly what would be required of me
Right.
from these subjects. Other than that, I didn't really do anything to prepare for IBDP.
Right. Okay, so what exactly made you go for a French app? Because we know that you were in Spanish,
Yeah.
and obviously in 11th you went for French app. So what made you do that switch?
So the reason I didn't continue with Spanish was because that I wanted to try a new language,
Right.
and I wanted to learn French since I liked the language and I just wanted something new because I had been learning Spanish since 4 years before French, and also other than that, I just thought that I would score better in French ab initio than Spanish B, even though I enjoyed Spanish, but I thought it would be better for me that if I took French ab.
Yeah. Okay, so anything that you would like to say to the students who have been who will be opting for French app next year?
I would say just keep on revising the content that you learn in class,
Yeah.
and always revise the vocabulary as well, and try to, especially for the speaking exam, try to
Yeah.
regularly think of everyday phrases like in French, even if
Right.
you can't come up with it, just to think of it.
Right. Okay.
Thank
So
you.
that's great piece of advice, Krish. Thank you, and thank you guys for listening to the podcast.
Okay, now I have Yatharth Shah from grade 11, and he'll be talking about his experience in French B. Um, just as a piece of information, Yatharth had studied French in MYP as well. So, first of all, Yatharth, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing great, Bruce. Thank you for having me today.
No problem. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. So, Yatharth,
Um,
to start off, can you just tell us a bit about what you learn in French B? What is the content that you cover?
okay, so basically, an overview of the content would be we learn about cultures, values, and beliefs. That's one of our main units, as well as languages and identity. Then
Okay.
we also take up things such as general life in vacations, like travel. All of those is also unit, and then all of the things related to culture, such as migration, customs, and then one final unit would be like human ingenuity. This is a more new unit as this is something we haven't been used to. And then it's a new unit because we learn about how humans function, but in a French context as well.
Right.
So those
Obviously.
are the few units.
Okay. So when you say like you learn about culture, for example, do you learn like the terminology related to cultures? Do you like read articles related to culture? What do you like? What happens in your classes normally?
So basically, we use the IBDP textbook provided by school. We learn about different cultures, especially in pays the francophone. That is basically countries that they were preoccupied by French people and now are currently using French language as their main language.
Okay.
This would include like Ghana, France, Belgium, all of those countries. And basically, we learn about their cultures, how their customs may be different from each other. For example, how French customs are different from Belgian customs. And we also learn about different cultural backgrounds, such as we read articles and learn about different facts about the culture so that we can use them in our summer course.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So, my next question would be, how does this relate to like how does what you've learned in your classes so far relate to what you've done in MYP?
In fact, I think this is the subject that is most linked to MYP. That's because these units we've done them in MYP before. This is just a fresh revision sometimes, and it helps us learn new terminologies for the unit. For example, like cultures and values. I feel like people would remember doing that in MYP as well. It's very common to
Right. Yeah,
do
yeah,
this
yeah.
in MYP and then just learn the terminology further on.
Okay.
Yeah,
So, in MYP, we also obviously have a lot of focus on ATL skills. So,
correct.
what ATL skills would you say you normally use in French B the most?
I think there are three ATL skills that I use extremely, like, a lot of the time. So basically, communication skills is in class we're supposed to discuss in pure French because according to our teacher, it's not considered okay. It's better to talk in
Right,
French and enhance our skills.
right,
Then we have also we have research skills. So this is important when we have our IOs and we have to research on facts based on the countries that we were given in our IO or topics
right.
that we were given. So that helps. And finally, thinking skills, because when you're speaking in a new language, you need to find ways to interpret that language and connect it with the English language as well. Because you have to translate that in your head, and it doesn't come with like without practice. So I think thinking, communication, and research skills are three ATL
Okay.
skills.
So, Yatharth, you mentioned like practicing right now. So, can you
Correct.
tell us a bit, like our listeners, a bit about how you practice exactly? Like, do you read books? Do you talk to people? What do you do to practice the language?
Um, One way I've learned how to practice is that in class, you just open your book to the last page. You write down a thing called the lexic. That's basically your dictionary. That's your
Right,
personal dictionary where you
right,
write down words and you translate them in English. Now, after that, what you do after classes, you just revise a few of those concepts. That will help you enhance your vocabulary to another extent. It will help you a lot, in my opinion. So
right.
I believe that if everybody can have a lexic, it'll be better for them. And just revise concepts that your teacher gives you. Honestly, it's not that difficult to, as people make it seem sometimes.
Right. Yeah, and like seek is something like this is something you can do in every language, right? Like even I use
Correct,
this for my
exactly.
Hindi. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like every language works now, exactly.
Right. Okay. And my final question to you would be, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to someone about IBDP in general?
I feel like people might come into IBDP thinking that it's going to be very similar to MYP. It's extremely different, and if you can't manage your time efficiently, you will have a burden of work just lying on your back. So you need to realize how to. You need to stop procrastinating and realize how you can time manage efficiently in order to get all of your tasks done. Because people might think at the start of MYP, okay, yeah, it's easy. Second semester comes, they're all in shock because they can't time manage properly. So
Right.
start off with time management and continue that throughout your course.
So basically develop an efficient time management technique that allows you to study effectively throughout so that you like don't procrastinate basically.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you procrastinate once, it's gonna cause a chain reaction which can affect your future, like a lot of your future endeavors as well. So I feel like
Right.
develop the skill of time management and it'll help you a lot.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much for your time today, Yatharth. It was a pleasure to have you on the
No problem.
podcast. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for having me. Thank you, Dinesh. Bye.
Okay, now I'll be interviewing Reva Tukral from grade 11 about her experience in Hindi B, which she's taken at the SL level and in IBDP. Okay, so first of all, Reva, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Reva. So, Reva, my first question to you is, can you tell our listeners a bit about what Hindi B is like in IBDP? What is some of the content of the subject and what all do you cover?
I think the content covered is very similar to what we did in MYP for those who continued Hindi in MYP as well. Like some of the examples include identity, culture, and religion and poverty, and the importance of all these things in our day to day lives. It is at a higher level compared to that it was in MYP with the language and the vocabulary used,
Right.
but the content covered is quite similar to MYP.
Okay, so for how would you say it sort of like transcends from MYP? So how does it exactly link to what you've done in MYP?
I feel like not only in Hindi, the content covered is very similar to what we covered in other subjects like INS when it comes to culture and poverty and stuff. And it's very similar to what we covered in all language acquisitions in MYP as well. Like the units are very similar. There is a shift in vocabulary and there is a shift in writing styles and the way you have to answer questions in DP for sure. And that's been pushed up quite a bit. But overall, the units and the concepts are very similar.
Okay, and what was your perhaps biggest challenge in taking? So, what was the biggest challenge you first faced when you entered IBDP in Hindi?
I think the biggest challenge that I faced was writing a lot. Like compared to MYP, we had to write much more. There was way more writing practice in our notebooks, and I
Okay.
think that's very necessary to like speed up and like get used to writing. And another one was listening, because the listening summatives are quite different than what we had in MYP.
Right.
They have much more enhanced vocabulary. So getting used to that and getting convenient with that is one of the main challenges.
Okay, so just to clarify here, um, listening and reading in IBDP is a lot like strand one of MYP,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's mainly MCQs, true or false, etc.
yeah,
And
that's
there are
true.
4 papers in all language acquisition subjects in IBDP:
Yeah.
listening, reading, writing, and your speaking, which is your internal assessment.
Yeah.
And so, Reva, what are certain ATL skills that you would say came in handy for this subject?
I think listening skills is one of
Right.
the main skills that came handy for the subject, because not only during our summatives but even during class tasks, there were multiple instances where we had to use our listening skills and write answers based on an audio, etc.
Okay. And so, Reva, a lot of students change their language acquisition language that they've chosen when they go from MYP to DP. So, what advice would you give to someone who maybe wasn't studying Hindi in MYP but has now chosen to take Hindi in DP?
I think it's not a very difficult shift. Keeping in mind you practice the required vocabulary. I think vocabulary is one of the important things.
Okay.
While writing, listening, speaking, all of the summits, vocabulary is one thing that's going to help you in all the summatives. So I think keeping that up to mark is the best thing anyone can do.
Okay. And finally, what is the one last piece of advice you would give to our listeners? It could be about the Hindi subject or just about IBDP in general.
I think about IBDP in general, time management is one of the most important things.
Okay.
Because managing your time well and procrastinating will lead you nowhere and just lead to a lot of work in the end. So, creating a precise schedule for what tasks and subtasks you're going to do throughout the week or throughout the month, and timely, and checklisting that is one of the advice I would.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time today and have a
Thank
good day
you.
ahead. Thank you.
Ayan, could you tell us about your experience in IBDP, and could you share a little bit about it?
Sure. So the IBDP is definitely been a challenge. It's a big step up from the MYP. I think that your workload increases significantly, as well as like the style of assessments you have. The way
Right.
you're being assessed, the way you're being taught is very different from the MYP.
Okay. And obviously, now we're coming to your subject, which is Spanish AB.
Yeah.
Tell me, what does this subject expect from its students?
So essentially, Spanish AB, despite the narrative, is not an easy subject. It essentially encompasses covering phase one, two, and three that you do in the MYP of languages within 2 years. So
Yeah.
it's a pretty extensive course in a short amount of time.
Okay. So tell me something that, I mean, you might have done something over the break or something, like you might have started practicing Spanish or started learning Spanish over the break. So can you tell me a bit about that, or did you just wait for the year to start and then probably then you started
So
understanding the subject? And yeah.
yeah, so one of my biggest regrets was not starting Spanish over the summer break. Like I did a little bit of Duolingo, but apart from that, I didn't really do anything. So
Okay.
I'd really recommend starting over the summer break so you can get like a head start at least on the first semester.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So given that obviously we're talking about Spanish AB right now, can you tell me the different concepts you cover in this subject and like how exactly do you start building on in this subject?
So sure. So we start off with like a bit of the basics of Spanish, and then we quickly move towards our first unit, which is like personal expression. Like you have to describe yourself, describe your friends, family. Then we move to like school, like describing your school, describing daily routines. Then we move to like leisure, climate. Then we move to habitat, like your house, your
Yeah.
apartment, stuff like that. And now our fifth unit that we're starting right now is travel.
Right. And obviously, how is that completely different from Spanish B?
So Spanish B, so essentially the last part of Spanish ab initio, like the toughest part is the basic beginner level of Spanish B. So it's a big jump up. So yeah, only do Spanish B if you feel confident in your abilities in Spanish from the MYP. Otherwise, switch to an ab initio language.
Okay. So, tell me a bit about this decision that you made. I assume that you were in French or Hindi last in grade 10.
Yeah, so I was in Hindi and then I switched to Spanish ab.
Yeah. So, what made you switch to Spanish app?
I wasn't doing the best in Hindi in the MYP, so I thought maybe it'd be a good idea to get like a fresh start in a new language and
Okay.
start with that to see if I could do better here.
Okay. So obviously this will be my last question to you. So what are the so how effectively or what are the different things that you do to manage your time? Because obviously there's not just one subject that you have to do. You have to do five other subjects, right? So how do you
Yeah. Honestly, I bought a whiteboard and I make like a to-do list for myself,
right?
and I use that to like keep myself on track, and then also setting reminders on my phone, ensuring that I'm always checking manage back in my emails for deadlines. Google Classroom, a lot of like TOK has done a lot on Google
Yeah.
Classroom. So just ensuring I'm up to date on all my like digital sites that give me my updates, and then also having my own way of like ensuring that I'm on time.
Right. So obviously now I'd just like to ask you about what are your thoughts and what would you like to recommend people who are going to choose Spanish AB in the next year, who will be coming to DP next year?
Make sure you start studying in the summer break. Don't wait until the first semester because the first semester is deceptively easy, but as soon as the second semester starts, it becomes a lot tougher.
Yeah.
So make sure you're prepared for that and make sure you're doing work over the summer so you're ready.
Okay. Thank you for your thoughts, Ayan. Thank you for your opinion.
We have Mahi Sharma from grade 11, and she has taken Spanish B as her language acquisition subject. So, hi Mahi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So, Mahi, can you tell us a bit about the topics covered in your subject, perhaps the units that you all have gone through so far?
Yes, so in Spanish B, we cover everything from culture to governance in Spain or any other Spanish country for that matter. The scope of the subject is very high because it covers a variety of topics. So far, we've covered a lot about the language itself, like grammar wise, and also things about their culture. So we explored the various festivals and traditions in the different Spanish countries, and then we also looked at tourism and ocio vacaciones, which is basically hobbies and vacations, and
Okay.
other interesting topics.
Okay, so how do you like? How does the content that you learned in MYP link to what you're doing in Spanish B and DP?
So whatever we did in MYP is sort of like it's sort of like the groundwork for what we're doing in DP.
Mhm.
So making sure that you're very thorough with everything that you've done in MYP is a huge advantage because in DP you're sort of building on that knowledge. For example, in MYP we covered this one unit on tourism,
Mhm.
and now we're doing the same thing just at a higher level.
High level. Okay.
So everything sort of builds on. There's a lot of new vocabulary because obviously it's more advanced now. So it's just like a continuation in terms of language acquisition.
Okay. And in terms of the assessments that you have, so you have four assessments. Your paper one is writing, paper two is reading, paper three is listening, and then you have your internal assessment, which is basically your spoken.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about each of those paper, what they're like, etc.?
Yes, so this is for standard level. I'm
Yeah.
not very sure about what happens at higher level, but in standard level, paper one writing is for 30 marks. And right now, as of now, we're getting two options while writing. So they give us one option A and option B.
Mhm.
And both of these prompts link to whatever unit we're doing right now.
Okay.
In the board exams, obviously, it will be quite different.
Mhm.
But based on OIS's assessments, we have a specific. Our teacher gives us specific units that he's planning on assessing in that assessment for paper 1, and the prompts will relate to that. And then we have to write from between, I think, 250 to 400 words on that topic, and you have to make sure that you pick the correct format.
Right.
Because for each prompt, you also get 3 format choices.
Hmm.
So one is correct, one is
Right.
slightly correct, and the third one is completely wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that links to
Yeah.
actually all language acquisition subjects.
Yeah.
For each prompt, you get 3 choices, and as Mahi said, one of them is the perfect
Yeah.
choice. One can work with that prompt, and one is definitely wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
like in paper 1, right now we're getting 2 prompts, but I think in the board exams we'll get 3.
3 prompts, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what ATL skills do you think come in most handy when you're studying Spanish in DP?
I think communication skills and self-organization skills are quite important, because and also transfer skills,
Okay.
because whatever grammar you learn in MYP is sort of carried forwarded to DP.
Mhm.
Because when you come to DP Spanish B, you're expected to be fluent in the language.
Okay.
Like, you're supposed to have a really good hold of the language, and you're supposed to know all of the tenses. Because like the teacher does provide you with resources if you're not fluent in, or if you're not very confident with any tense,
Mhm.
but then you're expected to be really good at it, so that you can start off quite strong, and all that you have to do is add certain vocabulary. So that sort of transfer of knowledge is very important. And self-organization, because any language acquisition B can be quite challenging,
Mhm.
especially if you didn't already know the language that fluently.
Mhm.
So it's almost like taking an HL subject at first.
Okay.
So yeah.
So yeah, related to that, can you tell us a bit more about how often you study the subject, how much you practice it, for how long, etc. Your study
Yeah.
schedule, basically.
So I tend to study based on what exams are coming up. So
Mhm.
for example, like for reading, in class we look at a bunch of texts,
Mhm.
and our teacher is really helpful in that way. He makes us read all of the texts and analyze the texts. So for reading, I don't have to do that much additional practice at home. However, I do go through some past papers if I
Mhm.
can find some, or I just look at the Hodder textbook,
Okay.
because it has a lot of reading passages. And then for listening, every day you have to listen to an audio in Spanish,
Okay.
so that you can sort of you can train your ears.
To-
Because in the Spanish B exams for listening, it gets really challenging. Like, for example, they make you listen to this conversation happening between like
Right.
5 people,
Yeah.
and then the questions are all jumbled up, like you don't know which option to match to which person. So
Right.
you really have to train your ear to be very good. And for the oral commentary, you have to make sure you utilize classes as much as you can for speaking in Spanish.
Right.
Because if you're someone who doesn't have like Spanish speaking friends outside of class,
Mhm.
then you won't be able to practice or
Right.
be very
Yeah.
well in that.
Okay, and thank you. And finally, what is the one piece of advice you would give to our listeners as they transition into DP?
I would say strengthen your tenses before you come, because tenses are really, really important. Like, it's the core of scoring well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mani.
Thank you, Dhruv, for having me.
Alright, guys, so that's it for today. We hope that the interviews were helpful and you learned something about whatever subjects you've chosen.
Please like, share, and subscribe, guys.
And hit the bell icon.
Bell icon for further notifications.
Thank you. Bye bye.